What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel, including my NWSL Championship game recap. So I will not be discussing that today in the Weekend Roundup. That video is already there, so check that out as well. I want to spend most of the time talking MLS playoffs, but I want to quickly acknowledge a couple things that happened in the Premier League. Of course, when Manchester City loses 4-0 and gets ripped to shreds by Tottenham and loses a fifth game in a row, that needs to be discussed and acknowledged. I talked about this the past couple weeks. I don't have too much new. This reinforces the idea that this is different. This is not just slumps sometimes that Manchester City have. They lose games when Rodri doesn't play. That was also reinforced here. Can they fix it? Sure. Just every game that this goes on, it's less likely that you're going to see this incredible surge to go catch up and overtake, at this point, Liverpool. And we're going to have to see how this matchup goes next weekend, because now you're looking at a pretty large gap if they don't at least get a draw out of that. Yes, this is unprecedented, and I'm not convinced it's going to continue. I'm not convinced that they're going to be able to make a title challenge. We just don't know what this is going to ultimately turn into because we've never seen this before with Manchester City. The other thing I want to throw in here is, in the midst of this, Pep Guardiola signed his contract extension. And in doing so, he took away the opportunity to distance himself from everything that is going to happen, good or bad. Because at one point he held the line that if my bosses lie to me, I'll leave. There was this possibility that he could have separated himself from both on and off the field this next chapter. That the longer this goes, the more it makes sense for him to leave at the end of this season. Clearly they've got work to do on the field in the summer. They're going to need to revamp a lot of stuff, and they're going to need to bring in new players. Logical time to change managers. This group looks tired. They could use a new voice. All of those typical things. Plus the charges and the potential for relegation. Pep could have taken himself out of that equation and detached his reputation from all of that. Instead, he doubled down. He's changed his tune. He signed the new contract extension. He said, I'll manage if we get relegated. And so there is no detaching Pep Guardiola from Manchester City. This was the decisive point. He is Manchester City now. Everything that is Manchester City is Pep Guardiola. To me, that was not the case until this moment, because he could have said, I don't want to be part of it. I don't want to be associated with it. Instead, he decided to go back his bosses, back the club, and not leave when things get challenging, and accept everything that comes with that. Again, for better or worse, feel how you want about it, but I wanted to throw that in there too. Both on and off the field, he's burning the boats and is going to see this out, no matter what that looks like. Then you also have his Manchester counterpart, Roman Amorim, draw against Ipswich in his first game, get the early goal. Then it's not so great after that. There's nothing to take from this. He just got there. This is not, he's barely had time to get to know his players, let alone implement a style. I'm just going to reinforce one more time. There were a lot of positive feelings about previous Manchester United managers too. It's not like They hired people who didn't know what they were doing or who didn't have success. Eminem checks all the boxes. This makes all the sense in the world to hire him. If somebody can fix this, he's probably pretty high up on the list of people I would choose. But there is no guarantee that a single manager can fix this because it is cultural, it is institutional. And of course, this is not just about one game, but just throwing this out there as things didn't start exactly as he would like. And he, after the game, was talking about kind of the disarray of the players and not having this anywhere close to where he wants it to be. Of course, that's going to take time. He deserves time. But this is not, the solution is not just cycling through managers. The problem is not always the manager. We're going to have to see what this looks like because to me, it got to a point where Erik ten Hag was part of the problem. But it didn't start that way. This is a completely different challenge, and I wrote a whole column about this when Ten Hag took the job. This is not about tactics. This is not about doing it at a higher level in terms of now you're in the Premier League, you're playing the best teams in the world. This is about, can you change the culture, the structure, the identity of the club? Can you change the mentality of the players and the people in the organization? That is a monumental task that should not fall on one person. But nobody else has really seemed to help this process. So right now it is basically falling to one person, and that is the manager. Maybe that changes over time with Ineos, but nothing that we have seen in Ineos' time running the show suggests there has been a dramatic change in culture and philosophy and organizational leadership. Maybe Eminem can do it. It's worth a shot. It just, if this doesn't work, I'm just saying it from the very beginning, it doesn't make it a bad hire. Some of this is outside of his control. He needs help, he needs support. And none of the Manchester United managers have gotten any of that, and they've all struggled in part because of it. Let's just see where things go, but I wanted to start with that point as it did not get off to the greatest start for him at Manchester United. Now, on to the MLS playoffs. Going to try and keep this pretty brief and really focus on just two things here. Number one, the story of these conference semifinals. It is really, really hard to keep beating the same team over and over again. Atlanta, LAFC, and NYCFC walked into those games having swept the season series against the team that they were playing. And then they all lost. And the Galaxy also had a series edge against Minnesota, but they didn't sweep the series. Obviously, I'll get to them. I'm saving them for the very end. They were ridiculously good. But those other three teams had to go do it again. And Atlanta, underdogs, the emotion of beating Inter Miami, the injuries to the strikers, just nothing went their way. That one's completely understandable. There's nothing really surprising there. NYCFC, New York Red Bulls, really good performance by the Red Bulls. Could have gone differently? Sure. That's also part of the way the Red Bulls play and part of the Red Bull philosophy. But they got that game to go the way they wanted to, and they executed. It's a rivalry game. Those teams were right next to each other in the regular season. There's nothing too shocking about that result either. Which then leads me to LAFC and Seattle. LAFC had gone, 10 unbeaten against Seattle heading into this game. And yes, it was a little bit different, and yes, they easily could have won this game. And they eventually get the goal, and then they gift it back, hand the Sounders a lifeline, and then Jordan Morris finds a way to get the goal in extra time, and the Sounders come out of LA with a win. But there is such a stark contrast. And in that, again, That game in and of itself, okay, Sounders super experienced. They know how to defend and make games ugly, right? They're very good in the playoffs for this very reason. Eventually, you're going to lose to a team. You can't just keep going undefeated against them. There's nothing shocking in a vacuum about this result either. The one thing I do want to emphasize, though, LAFC don't want to dictate terms of the game. They don't want to be on the front foot. They don't want to control proceedings. So you get that very lackluster first half. It's Ryan Hollingshead who eventually comes up with the goal, right? It's not Bouanga. It's not Giroud, Bogish. Go down the list of all of the attacking players. It's none of them. It's Hollingshead. Contrast that with the LA Galaxy, who had Ricky Puig playing outside of the foot, ridiculous through balls, 20 seconds into the game. They score immediately, give up a goal, right? Both LA teams then gave up a kind of weird and or surprising goal that caught them off guard. And to be fair, LAFC did actually respond pretty well to the goal. They did take a lot of shots in this game. They created chances. It was not the same kind of lethargic performance that they have had in those big games against teams that are as talented or more talented than them, because they are more talented than the Sounders. This is why they win in the Western Conference. This is why they have so much success. The formula generally works. But one thing doesn't go to plan, and all of a sudden you're in trouble. This has been my constant criticism and my frustration with LAFC and the way that they have built this team, because it didn't used to be this way. The Galaxy responded by going right back on the attack. They keep pouring in goals. Yeah, they give up some, but they end up winning 6-2. There's a penalty that's saved in there. It could have been 7. They were incredible. Gabriel Peck was unstoppable. Ricky Puig was ripping Minnesota United apart with his passing. And maybe they are too attack-minded. They're not balanced enough to win. The numbers will tell you they're not. But this is a really weird year, and they are clearly the best team left, and they are playing at home, and they are really hard to beat there. They're the obvious favorites moving forward. But this is the exact reason why, had these two teams met in the Western Conference Final, I would have picked the Galaxy. I talked about this the last time they played. And it played itself out again. That to me, the way LAFC are set up is just not a sustainable way to go win MLS Cup. It can get you in past some rounds. It can win you some games maybe you don't deserve. But there is such a difference between LAFC now and LAFC in 2022. And even in that game, you can have a conversation about whether they deserve that or not, because obviously lots of things happened. But there was a balance there. They were able to break teams down, and they're just not doing that anymore. And so the Sounders were able to hang in the game. One weird thing goes their way, and all of a sudden, they're in the Western Conference Final instead of LAFC. It's just another illustration of why I would always rather do it as the team with more talent do it the Galaxy's way. It gives you more control. Now, you've got to have the balance to it. We'll see if they can keep pulling this off, because they're scoring 5 goals a game in the postseason. That's not sustainable. I'll save more of that conversation for later on to see how far the Galaxy actually go and if they win MLS Cup. But just overall, to recap this here, none of these results in and of themselves were surprising if you just take them individually. And collectively, they are much easier to explain than whatever happened in the Eastern Conference in the first round. We may never see something like that again, when 3 of the best, at the very least, 3 of the best 5 teams in the league lost a best-of-3 series with home field advantage. One of them had Messi, one of them was the defending champions, one of them was the defending Supporters' Shield winners. There is no logical explanation. That's just weird things happen in the playoffs sometimes. This, you can actually talk through and understand why these things happen. And most of it is, these were just bad matchups for some of these teams, particularly the ones that lost. Outside of Minnesota United, they just got beat by a better team in better form. it's just so hard when you have to go beat this team again, right? Just mathematically, you're not going to beat a team every time you play them. I know it sounds kind of weird that it's just arbitrary and one game doesn't necessarily influence the next one. But I am a big believer that this is a thing. It happened to the Union as well. They had to play the Revolution for, I think it was the 6th time in that 2021 season. Or no, sorry, the 2020 season when they won the Shield. They got knocked down the first round of the playoffs. Because they just had to keep playing them and they keep beating them. Or at least going unbeaten against them. I think they won 4 out of the 5 or something. And drew the other one. To me, that's the story here. There is some explanation as to why things went the way they did, even though we had a bunch of upsets again and we only have a 2 seed standing here versus, a 4 seed, and a 7 seed. But this is the MLS playoffs. It's been very entertaining. This is the Galaxy's to lose. We're going to see if they can actually seal the deal and get it done. That is all for the weekend roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next time.